Good evening. I'm Steve Lafferty. I'm Deputy Director of Planning and Zoning for Howard County. You've heard and seen a lot of information already about the Columbia Downtown Master Plan. We've set out a vision for Columbia and its future. It's a broad master plan, a 30-year plan, not only for the next few years, but obviously needing to look well into the future as to what Columbia will be. We've set out design standards that Mina has presented to you to show how the development will be directed as we build out. So how can the community be sure that the issues which have been addressed will be implemented in a way that's adequate? Well, actually, the county has a set of systems in place. We have multiple safeguards which we believe will help us ensure that what has been planned and been envisioned through the charrette process will come to life. We have mechanisms to see that the visions, goals, and policies are realized. The county has a series of comprehensive plans and a capital budget which actually helps to guide much of what the future will be. Most of these are on 5 or 10-year cycles, looking at short-term, mid-term, and long-term objectives. Some of these examples may be known to you. The general plan, which many citizens helped to develop, the Water and Sewer Master Plan. There are plans for various agencies such as Fire and Rescue Services, our Economic Development Agency, and we have a Senior Housing Master Plan that also sets out various visions and goals for realizing the needs of seniors in the county. But Columbia's Downtown Master Plan will be more specific. We're in a time and place where we now have to look at how we're going to develop strategies that are going to help us realize that plan. And the implementation section of the plan will address 14 different issues that participants in the charrette helped to identify. And these strategies are intended to help this vision plan come to life. So let's take what Jim Rouse shared with us and looking to the future. Let's look at what might be and be invigorated by it. Let's not be timid, but let's also realize that we need to take some very concrete steps if we're going to get there. But the implementation, I think as many of us know, is going to be complex because there are many different elements that have to be taken into consideration. It's going to require a collective effort by the county, by property owners, by residents like you, to make sure that all of these elements which are important to the future of Columbia actually come to life. And we realize it's going to take patience and time because the plan itself is geared for 30 years. I'm going to try to present the implementation section and strategies to you in 3 different pieces. The first, providing public infrastructure and services. Secondly, protecting our natural and cultural resources. And thirdly, the management of the growth of the downtown. First, taking a look at the roadways and the transportation system. We want to plan to expand the road network and improve problem intersections. We have a network right now that's primarily carrying traffic on Little Patuxent Parkway, on Governor Warfield, and into the mall. What's being envisioned is a different network which will allow us to carry more capacity as build-out occurs. We realize that the existing transit system, while serving many needs, really is not sufficient. So we have to envision new components and new ways that we're going to get transit services in and out of town center. In fact, transit issues were one of the top 2 issues identified in the charrette. Currently, the county is contracting with the traffic consultant that was used to do a more detailed traffic study so that we can get even a better understanding of the traffic impacts of future build-out. We're looking at the road system in 3 different categories. And these 3 categories actually describe the nature of the roads as well as who's going to help to finance the improvements that might be needed. The first here is the local traffic and access, and that's shown in the yellow on the screen. This is infrastructure and roads that is going to be built by either by the private developer as plans come through. The second tier are the local and through traffic roadways, shown in the darker brown. Now these, as you can see, are Little Patuxent, Governor Warfield, Broken Land, and what's envisioned as a new road that will carry from Hickory Ridge Road over to South Entrance, just south of Meriwether Post Pavilion. The third tier is really the state roads, and that involves the interchanges at Broken Land, at 175, South Entrance Road, and then Route 29 itself. The new internal network, which is that first tier shown in the yellow, will help us ensure that we can carry sufficient capacity on the road system while trying to facilitate the creation of a more pedestrian-friendly environment. I know that Bill and Mina have already talked with you about how pedestrian activity is going to be critical to the future of downtown. Again, an issue which the charrette and the participants continually stressed throughout our discussions. Mina has talked with you about new street design guidelines. And these new street standards we hope to have created during this coming year so that we can start to see development plans incorporate these ideas. But with this will mean, with this higher level of amenities, such as benches, street trees, perhaps sidewalk that are made of brick or covered in brick, will bring along a different set of maintenance requirements. Those requirements will require a new approach, which I'll talk about a little bit later, but will require, again, a collaborative effort. When we look at the major roadways and intersections, we're talking about this second tier. How do people get in and out of the downtown, and how do they get in and out of the villages? How do we link to Route 29? Well, we know that we don't have all the answers. And there are certain areas, there are choke points that have been identified as problem intersections, which we're going to have to study. Now, the studying is only one part. That's the first stage, because without studying, we don't know how many dollars need to be allocated for any improvements. 4 of the areas that have been identified, either by people during the charrette, our traffic experts, or by our public works officials, are the northern intersection of Governor Warfield at Little Patuxent, Broken Land and Little Patuxent, Broken Land and Hickory Ridge intersection, and also at Twin Rivers at Governor Warfield, which is envisioned in the plan to carry more traffic into the mall. We're also looking into funding a study of the functioning of South Entrance Road. South Entrance Road currently is only used to bring people basically into Meriwether Post, but we see that as another vital way of getting into the town center. Likewise, the eastbound lanes of 175 need to be examined to see how we can increase the traffic capacity getting out to the interchange at 29. But in the short term, we're also looking at crosswalk improvements. One of the members of our focus group was repeatedly emphatic, and rightfully so, about the need to look at how pedestrians currently access the downtown. Well, if we're going to increase the amount of people walking up and down the streets, then we're going to have to make sure that improvements are made even in the short term to minimize or to mitigate what conflicts may be in place. And we also want to look at the current way that the Adequate Public Facilities Law operates to regulate traffic in the town center. We want to deal with the fact that additional development and more pedestrian activity means that our standards may not be adequate. And if we don't review these new review the standards, we won't be prepared for any future development. And then on US 29 and at the ramps, we're going to have to work closely with State Highway Administration. They're currently completing plans for a third lane on US 29. And again, working with our Department of Public Works, we're expecting SHA to undertake studies of the major interchanges to make sure that we can handle the traffic and that, in fact, traffic flow remains adequate. And after the studies, as I said, we're going to have to develop cost estimates that will allow us to budget for any improvements that are needed. As I said, transit was an issue that repeatedly came up during the charrette, and more than 3/4 of the tables of participants identified increased transit services as being critical to the future. And we totally agree. But we also know that this is going to be a multiple party responsibility. We get money from the federal government and from the county and from the state to operate our transit system currently. So in the short term, we want to evaluate how the transit system currently serves the downtown and whether or not we have adequate services for the demand. We also want, in any future plans that are submitted, to ensure that there's at least one location for transit usage in each of the districts, which were identified by both Bill and Mina. In the midterm, we also want to look at the potential for a shuttle service in the town center. Many people may remember Columbus that used to run throughout Columbia. Well, we now may need to revisit that as we see more and more people living, working, and visiting our town center. And in the long term, let's not forget that if we want to link to D.C. or to Baltimore, we're going to need to find some different methods of doing that. We're not on any heavy rail or light rail line, and if we're going to see the growth and the fact that more and more people live in Columbia but yet commute to Baltimore and D.C., we need to push the decision makers at the state level and regional level to bring about a different way of connecting Columbia to these two cities. Sort of bridging between infrastructure and services are the issues of water and sewer that were also raised during the charrette. Our public works officials have indicated that there's adequate water supply to meet the additional demand that's being projected. However, there is a pumping station that services the US 29 corridor that will need to be upgraded, and this is an expense the county would bear. At the same time, we will expect, as we do with all development, that the developers will provide the cost for sewer and water lines that need to be installed. Public Works does already have capital projects for additional sewer capacity to the town center. They've begun a study to see if the capacity, what kind of capacity is needed, and we've asked them to, and they've agreed to expand their study to build in some of the projections for development that our market experts have suggested. Another major concern that was raised throughout the charrette is whether or not there's going to be a demand for additional schools. The market analysis showed that most of the future residents are expected to be either empty nesters or people who are just entering the professional workforce and don't have children yet. But in working with the Howard County Public School System, their staff has indicated that the future pupil yields will be similar to those that they're seeing now. And so they don't think that either an additional middle school or high school is going to be required. They also have an elementary school site at Sunny Spring, which, if the population grows, would be available. At the same time, we have asked, and we do propose to reserve a potential school site within the Columbia downtown, more likely at the Crescent site, in case future growth does warrant the addition of another elementary school. And we're also going to talk with the school system about doing additional projections, so that if the demand for housing changes based upon the affordable housing requirements that have been regularly discussed by the focus group and at the charrette, that we can actually have an accurate understanding of what that will require. And annually we do update our adequate public facilities charts to see where schools need to be addressed. Fire and rescue services currently are in the Banneker station. This is an older facility which has been expanded and changed over time, and now we're at a point where it can no longer accommodate the equipment that's required. Well, not only the current residential growth and commercial growth, but the expected future growth means that there's going to continue to be a need to be sited in or near the downtown. There's an option of either expanding on the site or perhaps relocating in another location. And there have been discussions by the fire and rescue services about finding another site in downtown that could involve a land swap. We're expecting this work to actually begin during this next year. We're really fortunate in Howard County because we have one of the top library systems. But everybody recognizes that the library's current level of service could grow and still meet the demands of the current population. So if we're going to anticipate that the library remains a central institution for the county, we need to accommodate its need for either growth by relocating or by expanding on its current site. We're expecting the administrative personnel within the library, central library, to relocate by the year 2010, and this will then open up possibility of other resources or other space. The library is also undertaking a master plan, and that master plan in 2010 will also examine the two options. The second area of implementation is protecting our natural and cultural resources. All future development in the downtown will follow the current and most current regulations for such development as it protects the environment. One of these areas, of course, is stormwater management. Because when Columbia was built out, the downtown was built out, there were another set of regulations which will not apply. And because stormwater management is such a critical element to protecting the environment, we want to be sure that the most current solutions are used. Most of the downtown environmental resources are currently in protected and open space. And as Mina was pointing out, protection of the open space in the natural areas remain important to protecting really the resources that we have. It was suggested at the charrette, and in fact in our design guidelines we'll be incorporating some ideas of how to promote green buildings and green building site design techniques, again to help further protect the environment. The county does have a property tax incentive, which we'd like to see promoted more aggressively. Hopefully architects and builders will take advantage of it. But the real cultural asset for the downtown is Meriwether Post Pavilion. And clearly it's an asset not only for Columbia and Howard County, but the entire region. Well, the vision plan does call for housing and other development just south of Meriwether in the Crescent. And there was a concern raised that perhaps as you build out residential particularly, that the residents would oppose the continued presence of Meriwether. Well, the county certainly is, and there's no doubt that CA and residents throughout the county are committed to preserving and protecting Meriwether in its current form. In order to do that, we want to work with the development community and the builders to ensure there's noise mitigation standards which will help us to protect Meriwether and also to allow residential development to go forward. The third implementation section deals with the ideas surrounding the management of growth of the downtown. And I have to say that this is one of the areas that the focus group was one of the most valuable to us, because they continually raised issues which we've been thinking about and we've been looking at, but which they helped us to think about in some different ways. And one of the first issues, and again, one of the top two issues that came up throughout the charrette, has to do with the continuing challenge that Howard County faces to bring about more affordable housing units. Columbia has diverse housing types, and due to the foresight of James Rouse, has the highest percentage of affordable housing units in the county. You know, he could envision and understood the need to have different housing opportunities, rental or home ownership, apartment or condo or single family homes, because of the different demands of people who want to live here. Well, the county has many zones in which we can require that moderate income housing units be provided. But Newtown or Columbia is not included in those zones, is one of those zones. It needed not be because of James Rouse's foresight. Well, we are proposing, though, at this point in time, that the county zoning regulations be amended so that 10% of all future housing units be in the moderate income housing program and be moderately priced, and that 5% be actually put into a new category of middle income housing units. We talk about moderate income as being people who are earning between 50 and 80% of the median income, whereas looking at people in the middle income range as being people above 80% up to 110%, which in Howard County still is not sufficient to buy housing that is now, for which now the prices are continuing to rise. The issue of phasing, again, continually came up through the focus groups, and I'm sure we'll hear more comments about those throughout the evening. The phasing of development has to be flexible to allow the market forces to work and the funding opportunities for new development to occur. At the same time, we recognize that any future development is going to be phased to include the provision of public infrastructure by the developer, as well as the provision of streetscape and urban amenities. One of the things that we're quite concerned about is how do we continue to provide amenities on the street as well as see the build-out of commercial and residential in a measured way. We have adequate public facilities tests which will help determine some of the phasing. And the development of residential units will be linked to commercial build-out and to the provision of amenities on the street. And some of those amenities were ones that Mina was helping to describe, was describing earlier. We also have, for the construction of residential units, a requirement that they pass not only the schools test as part of adequate public facilities, but we have allocations that are provided on an annual basis. Currently, Columbia has approximately 1,500 allocations available to it over the next 6 years. This means that over the next 6 years, we can anticipate no more than 1,500 residential units to be built, and the allocation system will help to measure that build-out. There'll be zoning regulations amendments as well, and these will also help us to look at the phasing. And we're going to be setting benchmarks so that we can actually gauge along the way whether or not the intentions have been realized. There are a number of early initiatives that have also been laid out. We're anticipating those to come online over the next few years. They're listed actually in the implementation document, which is on our website, which you're more than welcome to look at. And then in the year 2010, as the next general plan is put in place, we'll be setting the allocations for the future, for the following 10 years. One of the components of managing the new downtown has to do with how do we deal with the higher level of amenities. People continually have said they want more urban amenities, more open space, enhanced maintenance, increased activities on the street if there are going to be more people. So how do we manage that when right now there are individual property owners with separate responsibilities, the three major ones being Columbia Association, General Growth, and Howard County, and how do we ensure there's good enough and improved coordination and collaborative action so that we get a higher level of service? Well, the three major property owners, CA, General Growth, and the county, have been meeting to look at the creation of what we've talked about as the Downtown Partnership. And this partnership would actually take on a collaborative effort to maintain the public spaces, to maintain those new amenities that are on the street, to make sure the public art is clean and the benches are in good repair. And this is, I think, something that's just reasonable for the citizens to expect. Well, how do we monitor and ensure there is actual progress and results that you've wanted to see? Well, success of the master plan truly depends on effective monitoring. And we anticipate that our annual development monitoring report will be changed so that we actually have a section on Columbia. So that people, and you can find the report actually on the web now, but by adding a section on Columbia allows us to see more specifically what the development activity and other activity is in the downtown. The county will also establish a downtown master plan monitoring committee made up of citizens to help us look at whether or not the implementation progress has been met. And we anticipate this will take place in about 5 years and happen in conjunction with the general plan. And we'll look at such indicators as whether the infrastructure capacity improvements have been made. That means that are the sewer system and street network, the water system, are they meeting the needs? Have there been road improvements to handle additional capacity? We'll also look at the timely provision of streetscape, open space, and other amenities. Again, we want amenities to come along at a time when the construction is taking place, so that as we ask more people to be on the street and to come downtown, they can find a place to sit, they can find a place to walk, and they can enjoy the streets that are envisioned. Also, we'll look at the provision of moderate and middle-income housing units and anticipate that they'll be phased in as the residential development occurs. And also, but not certainly the last indicator, is the balance between the commercial and the residential, so that we do get the mixed-use environment that everybody has said they'd like to see. And finally, we've started many of the steps that have been laid out before you tonight. And Columbia of today has taken about 40 years to reach this point, and we know that the next 30 years we're going to see a lot of changes as well. Well, since there's a shared belief in the vision that we have, we know it's going to be important that there's collaboration in order to implement this. And I want to thank you for listening. I know it's been a long evening. I'd now like to turn over the presentation to Marcia McLaughlin, the Director of the Department.